Welcome back. Today we're going to do a quick one on the Tanchjim for you. So I think what's interesting just looking at the box is that maybe this was a collaboration with HifiGo. HifiGo certainly sent this to me, so I appreciate that, but I didn't realize that they were somehow involved with the development of this set. So I thought that was kind of a unique surprise when I opened the box. What wasn't a surprise was, the metal shell and the mirror kind of inset. Very, very high quality. This is about a $70 set. The build quality is kind of right there. It's really nice. I mean, it's a really comfortable, super shiny, mirror faceplate inset right there. This one says for you. This one, I think, says Tanchjim on it. So, yeah, I mean, super, super cool. Nice nozzles, nice shell. This, of course, is the bass switch. So you get 4 positions. The thickness of the line actually designates the bass level, and if you point it towards the nozzle, you get the unfiltered most bass, which is called atmosphere. Cable is pretty cool. It's kind of your 2-core, silver-plated, little gold foil, silver foil, something that you start to see around. This is, I don't know, maybe the 3rd or 4th version of this cable that I've run across, so getting more popular as it goes along. So we'll kind of jump into it right there and move these out of the way without dropping them, hopefully. So, kind of at the beginning, so what is it? This is a single dynamic driver. Tanchjim calls this one DMT4. It's an LCP diaphragm, dual chamber dynamic driver with 4 switchable flavors of bass level. So kind of at the higher level, that's essentially what it is. It's a very nice single dynamic driver. What's special about this one, I would say it's an odd combination of a very nice dynamic driver with very safe tuning. Kind of a shallow V shape. One of the nicer single dynamic driver sets for treble sensitive listeners, but not really for low volume listeners because you need to click it up a couple times for it to have some engage. It's kind of a relaxed, I don't know, restrained isn't the word, but a reserved tuning. So there isn't a whole lot of engagement from the treble. Those levels are pretty conservative. So if you're expecting to be wowed like in the first 2 minutes, it's not that type of set. It's kind of more of a slow burn, kind of get into it and relax kind of set. But, as far as being slightly odd with this tuning, right, it's a really nice dynamic driver, but they put a really safe tuning on it. So it's kind of hard to get, I would say on the technical details of it, I think that's kind of the safer version of it. I think that the driver is more than capable of doing some really nice technical things, but they chose to do a tuning which didn't necessarily emphasize that side of the driver. So yeah, I thought it was kind of an odd choice to me, but I kind of get it when you look at the graph. So the bass switch, I looked at 2 uppers, the atmosphere or the pop. I think pop is the better balance. Atmosphere is more bass, but kind of masked some of the upper. Like I said, the treble is very reserved. There isn't a whole lot of spare room there in the upper treble to have the bass kind of overriding it or masking it. So not a whole lot to spare in the upper. So I do prefer the pop, which is rolled off just a little bit more compared to atmosphere. So is pop too sub-bass rolled off? And certainly not. It is a trade-off between having sub-bass extension while not masking too much of the upper treble, as I was talking about, and maintaining control. I didn't prefer atmosphere exactly for that reason. Sounds fun, but gets distracting to an overall clean and natural sound, which is what you get here. So I didn't graph all 4 of them. I didn't really care about the other ones. I thought pop was the one that, just looking at it, you can tell it's sort of the one that's the most in balance and had a pretty good shot. And I will say that most sets I say they sound pretty much like they graph. This one's a little different because it sounds a little bassier because this sounds a little, well, in your ear, the treble actually sounds a little more reserved, a little bit lower, and that gives you more presence here. So what does it sound like in ear versus the graph? It sounds like there's a little bit more bass and a little less treble. So this looks like it's in balance, and that's exactly why I didn't like atmosphere either. I think actually increasing the bass level doesn't make a whole lot of sense because this is sort of still tilted. It actually tilts in the way that it just sounds a little bit more present here and less present here, despite these peaks and what looks like there's happening a lot in the upper treble. There's actually not a lot. There wasn't a whole lot of spare energy out here, despite what the graph says. And then you throw a little more sub-bass onto it like atmosphere does, and then this becomes really hard to hear. So that is why I stuck with the pop. So the bass, or let's talk about sound. So definitely, like I said, one of the better, no shout, no sibilance, no fatigue tunings. Safe, reserved, relaxed, more for people looking for a smooth playback versus detail chasers. And on the bass, obviously the interesting part of it was this filter, the four-way filter that they have, where it's actually three filters and one that's unfiltered. But I think when you look at the whole graph, it's a bit too much. The atmosphere, or I'll say that looking at the graph, the first one that people were drawn to was the one with the most bass. That was the atmosphere. But when you look at the whole graph, like I just talked about, it's a bit too much for the treble level that comes across in ear. This tuning can't really handle a huge sub-bass ramp, so I can't argue with the levels and what they did. I think in the style, I want the bass to just support the mids, and pop really worked for me in that respect. And like I said, it actually looks pretty... It's the one that looks the most balanced and the one that was not going to have too much sub-bass. And then to compensate out here, yeah, I think it was atmosphere, even though people will say it's not bass head and it doesn't have a whole lot of bass. I think the way they tune this and this kind of reserved, kind of this relaxed pinna area, this is actually lower than what it sounds like. I think these whole levels really required the lower bass levels, and that makes sense on why there's one that's above this, then there's pop, and then there's two more below that. And when you listen to it in ear, you sort of understand why they kept on going lower and lower, because this doesn't sound nearly as energetic as it looks like on the graph. So the mids, and I will say this tuning is all about the timbre versus tech. For You is tuned very much for timbre over tech. So like I said, it's for people who want a smooth, natural playback, not so much for detail chasers. So you can really expect a natural, smooth sound, but not a sharp, defined, dynamic, separated, layered experience. Those kind of sets, some dynamic drivers do that. This one, not so much. This one is for people who want a flute to sound like a flute. You are very much interested in very natural sounding timbre on instruments. That's what this one is really tuned for. So in the style, For You is really well done, but also why I don't like the more bass version of Atmosphere. Too warm, too soft. A lot of these things that would give you maybe a little bit more sharpness. If there was just a little bit more treble and you had a little bit more definition, a bit more edge, I think they could have pulled that off with Atmosphere. But in tuning it for timbre the way they did, I think the Atmosphere just adds a little bit of too much warmth, too much softness. You sort of lose any of the technical things that come across on For You get even buried more within the Atmosphere. So again, that's another reason why I stuck with pop. So treble, straight, safe treble levels with decent extension. Perhaps not laser sharp, but it fits with a relaxed sound while still maintaining timbre and an open sound. Mostly where I would say the low volume listeners are going to need a notch or two up here. And like I was just saying, that this, on the graph, this doesn't look nearly as energetic as it is in ear. So at lower volume, this is even lower. This will have more presence. So yeah, at lower volume, this thing is tilted even more. And that's why I say you should actually click it up a couple notches on volume, and this becomes a little bit more present, and you get better balance between the two. So while I think it's very much safe for treble sensitive people who are really into lower volume and having quite a bit of treble in your ear, that's not really this type of set. This is more for people who are going to turn it up, at least to medium volume, so they could hear the full frequency range. So stage, decent space, but again, the safe, relaxed tuning isn't going to lean into a lot of air or big stage. It's kind of okay. It actually does a pretty good job with, the tuning that it did. But again, one of these things that you're really looking for people who are more interested in timbre style sets who are, for people who are treble sensitive. These are not people who are looking for huge air and huge stages, different types of sets. That's more of an oxygen type of thing. So again, thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.